Sarah Chen stared at the pulsing holographic display, her fingers hovering over the anomalous data patterns that no one else seemed to notice. The antimatter containment field's resonance frequency showed microscopic fluctuations, barely detectable, but potentially catastrophic given enough time. Around her, the vast research chamber of Station Helios hummed with activity, its crystalline walls reflecting the blue-white glow of countless monitors and instrument panels. Still obsessing over noise in the system, Engineer Chen. The voice came from behind her, dripping with familiar condescension. Director Nexel's translucent outer membrane shimmed with barely concealed irritation as he approached her workstation. The Mercidian administrator's four eyes blinked in their characteristic asynchronous pattern, a sign of dismissal in his species. With respect, Director, these aren't random fluctuations, Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady despite the frustration building in her chest. The pattern matches exactly with my theoretical models for quantum-level containment degradation. If we don't address this now, your models, Nexel interrupted, emphasizing the word as if it were a particularly distasteful specimen, are based on human understanding of antimatter physics. Quite primitive compared to Mercidian science, wouldn't you agree? He didn't wait for her response. The containment system was designed by our finest minds. It has functioned perfectly for 3 decades. Sarah bit back her immediate response. She learned early in her 2-year posting that direct confrontation rarely worked with Mercidians. Instead, she pulled up another display, this one showing a complex series of equations. The mathematics are universal, Director. The resonance patterns show a clear. Enough. Nexel's membrane flashed a warning shade of orange. You were assigned here as part of the Galactic Integration Initiative. A political gesture, nothing more. Know your place, Engineer Chen. Some of us earned our positions through merit rather than quotas. The words hit like physical blows, but Sarah kept her expression neutral. She'd heard variations of this speech dozens of times since arriving on Station Helios. The Mercidians viewed humanity as barely more than clever animals, tolerated only because of humanity's surprising knack for solving certain types of problems. That very same dismissal had allowed her to notice what they couldn't or wouldn't see. Of course, Director, she said quietly. My apologies for overstepping. Nexel's membrane settled back to its usual pale blue. Good. Now, there's a delegation from the Arcturus Consortium arriving next week. They'll want to tour the containment facility. Please ensure your workspace is presentable. His gaze lingered meaningfully on the collection of Earth items decorating her station. A small potted succulent, a holopic of her family, a worn copy of Feynman's lectures on physics. After he glided away, Sarah let out a slow breath and turned back to her displays. The containment field's fluctuations were still there, slowly but steadily growing in amplitude. She pulled up the station's historical data, cross-referencing it with her own carefully collected measurements from the past 6 months. The pattern was undeniable. To anyone willing to see it, a soft chime from her comm unit interrupted her thoughts. A message from Dr. Kira Patel, one of the few other humans on the station. Drinks at Observation Deck 7. You look like you need to vent. Sarah smiled slightly. Kira had become a close friend and confidant, one of the few people who actually listened to her theories. She sent back a quick affirmative and began securing her workstation for the day. The walk to Observation Deck 7 took her through the station's main promenade, a vast space designed to accommodate dozens of different species. Mercidians glided gracefully on their hover platforms, while bulky Taurians lumbered past on their 4 legs. A group of crystalline quantum collective nodes hung suspended near the ceiling, their faceted bodies refracting the artificial light into rainbow patterns. The observation deck itself was relatively quiet at this hour. The vast window showed a breathtaking view of the nearby nebula, its swirling purple and blue gases backlit by distant stars. Kira was already there, her dark skin seeming to glow in the ethereal light as she nursed something that looked suspiciously stronger than the synthetic alcohol usually served to human staff. Real bourbon, Kira confirmed with a conspiratorial wink as Sarah sat down. Smuggled in with the last Earth supply shipment. I've been saving it for a special occasion, and your face after talking to Nexel definitely qualifies. Sarah accepted the offered glass gratefully. Am I that transparent? Only to someone who's been there. Kira took a sip of her own drink. Let me guess, more patronizing remarks about human intelligence. Or was it another lecture about knowing your place? Both, plus a bonus reminder that I'm only here because of quotas. Sarah swirled the amber liquid in her glass. But that's not what bothers me. The containment field fluctuations are getting worse, Kira. The pattern matches exactly with my degradation models, and no one will even look at the data. Kira's expression grew serious. How bad? Bad enough that we should be implementing contingency measures now. But Nexel won't even acknowledge the possibility that their perfect system could be failing. Sarah pulled out her personal tablet, showing Kira the latest readings. See these harmonic resonances. They're increasing exponentially. At this rate. How long? Kira's voice was barely above a whisper. 2 weeks. Maybe 3. Unless something changes dramatically, we're going to see a cascade failure of the entire containment system. Sarah took a long drink. And when that happens, it won't just be Station Helios at risk. The antimatter reaction could take out half the sector. Kira studied the data with the focused attention Sarah had come to expect from her friend. As the station's xenobiologist, she might not understand all the physics involved, but she grasped the implications perfectly. We need to do something. I've tried everything I can think of through official channels. Multiple reports, formal requests for system audits, even attempted to contact the Mercidian Science Council directly. Sarah's fingers tightened around her glass. They either ignore me or treat me like an ignorant child playing with technology beyond my comprehension. Then we go unofficial, Kira said firmly. There has to be someone who will listen. The Arcturus Consortium delegation next week. They're not under Mercidian influence. If we could get your data to them, that would be a direct violation of at least 6 different security protocols. Sarah's mouth quirked into a half smile. I like how you think. Well, what's the worst they could do? Fire us and send us back to Earth. Kira raised her glass in a mock toast. Better than being vaporized in an antimatter explosion. Sarah clinked her glass against Kira's, but her mind was already racing ahead, calculating possibilities and risks. The Arcturus Consortium was known for its pragmatic approach to interspecies relations. If she could present her evidence correctly, bypass the Mercidian bureaucracy entirely. A sudden tremor ran through the station, subtle enough that most might have dismissed it as imagination. But Sarah's instruments had made her attuned to the station's normal rhythms. This vibration was new and wrong. Her tablet chimed with an alert. The containment field fluctuations had just jumped by 3%. It's starting, she whispered, pulling up the live data feed. Sooner than I predicted. We don't have 2 weeks, Kira. We barely have days. The nebula's peaceful glow seemed to mock them as they sat in silence, contemplating the invisible time bomb at the station's heart. Sarah thought of all the beings on Station Helios, even the dismissive Mercidians, going about their lives, unaware of the danger building beneath their feet. She had spent her entire career fighting to be taken seriously, to prove that humanity deserved its place among the stars. Now that same dismissal might doom thousands, unless she found a way to make them listen. Sarah squared her shoulders, decision made. I need your help, Kira. What I'm planning, it could end my career, possibly get me banned from every research facility in known space. Kira didn't hesitate. Tell me what you need. As they began to plan, neither of them noticed the tall, shadowy figure watching from across the observation deck, its multifaceted eyes reflecting the nebula's light with unusual intensity. The maintenance tunnels of Station Helios were never meant to be beautiful. Unlike the gleaming public spaces above, these corridors were purely functional, a maze of pipes, conduits, and access panels that kept the station's vital systems running. For Sarah Chen, they had become a second home over the past 72 hours. She crouched in a junction between two antimatter coolant pipes, her tablet interfaced with a diagnostic port that officially didn't exist. The station's vibrations had grown stronger, though most residents still hadn't noticed. The Mercidian engineers had begun running additional diagnostics, but they were looking in all the wrong places. Security sweep coming up on level 12. Kira's voice crackled through her earpiece. You've got about 8 minutes. Almost done, Sarah muttered, her fingers flying over the tablet's surface. She was building a backdoor into the containment system's monitoring protocols, not to change anything, but to gather data that would prove her theories correct. The evidence had to be undeniable. A shadow fell across her work. Sarah froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. Hadn't heard anyone approach, and Kira was supposed to warn her of any movement in this sector. Fascinating approach, said a voice like crystalline wind chimes. Using the maintenance subsystems to bypass the primary security protocols. Most elegant. Sarah turned slowly. The being standing behind her was tall and insectoid, its carapace shifting through subtle shades of blue and silver. A Vakir, one of the most enigmatic species in known space. They were renowned as diplomats and mediators, but Sarah had never seen one on Station Helios before. I'm conducting authorized maintenance, she said, the practiced lie feeling hollow even as she spoke it. The Vakir's antennae twitched in what might have been amusement. No, you're not. You're gathering evidence of containment field degradation using methods that violate at least 8 different security protocols. A pause. Please continue. I find your work most interesting. Sarah's mind raced. She could hear Kira's panicked breathing through the earpiece, but the Vakir made no move to stop her or call security. Instead, it settled against the opposite wall, multifaceted eyes reflecting the soft glow of her tablet. You're part of the Arcturus Consortium delegation, Sarah realized. But you're not supposed to arrive until next week. I arrived early. Unofficially. The Vakir's carapace rippled. I am Zexley, though that name rarely appears in official records. Your models predicting the containment failure. I would very much like to see them. A trap? Perhaps, but Sarah was running out of options and time. She pulled up her complete analysis, including the latest data showing the accelerating degradation pattern. Zexley studied the information in silence, antennae moving in complex patterns. Your mathematics are correct, they finally said. But you've underestimated the severity. The cascade failure will begin within 15 hours, not days. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. 15 hours. That's not possible. The resonance patterns are being amplified by a previously unknown interaction with the station's shields. The Mercidians' containment technology, while advanced, never accounted for this possibility. Zexley's voice held no accusation, only a calm certainty that made Sarah's blood run cold. We have to evacuate the station, she whispered. The nearest evacuation points are 20 hours away at maximum speed, and an evacuation order would require Mercidian authorization, which they will not give until it's too late. Zexley straightened. However, there may be another option. Your original theory about stabilizing the containment field through quantum resonance manipulation. It could work with some modifications. Sarah stared at the Vakir. How do you know about that? That research was in my private files. The Vakir have been watching you. Sarah Chen. We have been watching many humans. Your species has a unique way of approaching problems. You see patterns others miss, solutions others would never consider. Zexley's carapace shifted to a deeper blue. The Mercidians dismissed this as primitive thinking. We see it as evolution in action. The station shuddered again, harder this time. Sarah's tablet displayed a new alert. The containment field fluctuations had spiked another 5%. In the distance, emergency klaxons began to sound. Security teams mobilizing on all levels. Kira's voice crackled. Sarah, they're starting to figure out something's wrong. Zexley's antennae twitched. Your friend in station operations. Good. We'll need her help. They extended a slender, crystalline appendage. You have a choice, Sarah Chen. Continue gathering evidence while time runs out, or work with me to implement your solution. Unauthorized and likely illegal under station law. Sarah thought of the thousands of beings on Station Helios, of the populated worlds within reach of an antimatter explosion. She thought of her career, of all she'd worked for. Then she took Zexley's offered appendage. What do you need me to do? The next few hours passed in a blur of desperate activity. While Kira ran interference from operations, creating false work orders and redirecting security teams, Sarah and Zexley moved through the station's maintenance systems like ghosts. The Vaker's knowledge of quantum mechanics was far beyond anything Sarah had encountered, helping her refine her stabilization theory into something workable. They established a makeshift control center in an abandoned maintenance hub, surrounded by jury-rigged equipment and holographic displays showing the deteriorating containment field. Sarah's fingers flew over the controls as she implemented the necessary modifications, while Zexley made subtle adjustments to her calculations in real time. Security is losing patience, Kira reported. Director Nexel is demanding a full system lockdown. Whatever you're going to do, it needs to happen soon. Sarah watched the containment field measurements with growing dread. The resonance patterns were approaching critical levels. Even with their modifications, there was no guarantee her theory would work. If she was wrong, stop what you're doing immediately. Director Nexel's voice boomed through the station's comm system. Our sensors detect unauthorized access to critical systems. Security teams are authorized to use lethal force. Zexley's carapace rippled with colors Sarah couldn't interpret. They fear what they don't understand. It's why they never saw this coming. Humanity's greatest strength is your ability to embrace the unknown. The station lurched violently. Warning signals blared from every display. Containment field reaching critical resonance, Sarah announced, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Beginning quantum stabilization sequence. She activated the modified protocols. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the holographic displays erupted with cascading data as her program began its work. The containment field's energy patterns shifted, reformed, and stabilized in ways that defied conventional physics. Fascinating, Zexley whispered. You've created a self-sustaining quantum harmony. The Mercidians would say it's impossible. But will it work? Sarah demanded. The station shuddered one final time. On the displays, the containment field fluctuations began to decrease. Slowly at first, then faster, the dangerous resonance patterns dissolved into stable wavelengths. Then the maintenance hub's door slid open with a hiss of hydraulics. Director Nexel floated there, surrounded by armed security officers, his membrane flushed deep orange with rage. Engineer Chen, he said, his voice trembling with barely controlled fury. You will surrender yourself for arrest immediately. But Zexley was already moving forward, their crystalline form seeming to grow larger. I think not, Director. I believe we need to have a very interesting conversation about the future of Station Helios and humanity's role in it. The conference room, A7 of Station Helios, had never felt so small. Sarah sat at one end of the long table, surrounded by holographic displays showing containment field data. Across from her, Director Nexel's membrane rippled with suppressed emotion as he faced not just Zexley, but 3 other members of the Arcturus Consortium who had emerged from hiding. The evidence is irrefutable, Zexley was saying, their crystalline form casting prismatic patterns across the table. Engineer Chen not only identified the containment field degradation, but implemented a solution that saved this station and potentially the entire sector. A solution implemented without authorization, Nexel countered, by accessing restricted systems and violating multiple security protocols. Would you have preferred the alternative? One of the other consortium members, a Thorian with iridescent scales, leaned forward. Our preliminary analysis suggests the antimatter containment breach would have affected 12 populated systems. the death toll would have been in the billions. Sarah watched the exchange in silence, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The last 6 hours had been a blur of security interviews, technical briefings, and increasingly heated debates about jurisdiction. The station's security forces had been ready to arrest her until Zexley revealed their true identity. Not just a vacant diplomat, but the head of the consortium's Advanced Technologies Division. The fact remains, Nexel pressed, that this human took matters into her own hands rather than trusting in proper authorities. After those same authorities dismissed her warnings repeatedly, Kira interjected from her position near the door. She had been allowed to attend as a witness, though her own role in events was still under investigation. I have records of every report Engineer Chen filed, and every rejection she received. The fourth consortium member, a being of pure energy contained within a sophisticated environmental suit, pulsed with what might have been amusement. Perhaps that is precisely why we are here, Director Nexel. The Arcturus Consortium has been monitoring various research stations throughout known space, evaluating how different species interact and collaborate, or fail to do so. A test. Nexel's membrane paled. This was all a test. Not the containment field degradation, Zexley clarified. That was very real and very dangerous, but we had received reports of systematic dismissal of human insights across multiple facilities. We wanted to observe firsthand how these prejudices might impact critical situations. Sarah's head snapped up. You knew this was going to happen. We suspected something would, the Thorian said gently. Though we didn't know exactly what form the crisis would take, the containment field degradation was a natural consequence of the Mercidians' unwillingness to consider alternative viewpoints. Your species has a unique understanding of quantum mechanics that could have prevented this problem years ago. This is outrageous, Nexel sputtered. The Mercidian Science Council will not stand for. The Mercidian Science Council, interrupted the energy being, its voice resonating directly in their minds, will be very interested in our full report, particularly the sections detailing how their supposedly perfect containment system nearly caused a catastrophe that their own engineers failed to predict. Sarah watched as Nexel's membrane shifted through various colors of distress. The political implications were starting to sink in. Station Helios was more than just a research facility. It was a symbol of Mercidian technological superiority. This incident threatened not just the station's reputation, but the Mercidians' standing in the galactic community. What do you want? Nexel finally asked, his voice subdued. Zexley's antennae moved in a complex pattern. Change. Starting with Station Helios, a complete reorganization of the research hierarchy, with positions assigned based on merit rather than species. Engineer Chen's quantum stabilization theories will be fully investigated and implemented where appropriate. And, the Thorian added, a formal recognition of humanity's contributions to galactic science. Too long has your species been treated as barely civilized curiosities. Today's events prove that perspective is not just incorrect, but dangerous. Sarah felt a weight lifting from her shoulders, but another settling in its place. You're going to use me as a symbol, she realized aloud. If you're willing, Zexley confirmed. Your actions today demonstrate everything we've observed about humanity. Creativity, courage, and an ability to see solutions where others see only problems. The galaxy needs these qualities, especially now. Now, Sarah caught the emphasis in Zexley's tone. What's coming? The consortium members exchanged looks. Finally, the energy being pulsed forward. We have detected anomalies at the edge of known space, signs that something is approaching, something that may challenge everything we think we know about the universe. We need new perspectives, new ways of thinking. We need humanity's unique approach to problem solving. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Sarah thought about everything that had happened, her struggles to be heard, the constant dismissal of her ideas, the desperate race to prevent disaster. She thought about other humans on other stations, fighting the same battles. I'll do it, she said firmly. But I have conditions. Nexel made a choking sound, but Zexley's antennae twitched with interest. Go on. First, Kira and any other station personnel who helped me are completely cleared. Second, I want a joint human-alien research team with real authority to investigate and implement safety measures across all stations using antimatter containment technology. She took a deep breath. And third, I want to establish a program to identify and support other humans whose ideas are being ignored. No more waiting for disasters to prove we're right. The Thorian's scales rippled with what might have been approval. Bold demands, but reasonable ones, Zexley said. And precisely the kind of thinking we need. They turned to Nexel. Director, I trust you'll cooperate with these arrangements. Nexel's membrane had settled into a pale, defeated gray. Do I have a choice? There are always choices, the energy being pulsed. Today, Engineer Chen chose to save lives rather than follow rules. The consortium chose to trust in human potential rather than dismiss it. Now you must choose. Adapt to a changing galaxy or be left behind. Sarah felt the weight of the moment, the sense that something fundamental had shifted in the relationship between humans and aliens. But her mind was already racing ahead, thinking about the anomalies at the edge of space, about other humans whose insights might be crucial in the coming days. One more thing, she said, pulling up a holographic display. While I was working on the containment field, I noticed something in the quantum resonance patterns, something that might be related to your anomalies. Zexley moved closer, antennae quivering with interest. Show me. As Sarah began to explain her observations, she caught Kira's proud smile from across the room. They had started this day as outsiders, barely tolerated. They were ending it as partners in something much bigger than themselves. The station hummed around them, its containment field now stable with harmonics that defied conventional physics, a testament to what was possible when different perspectives came together. And somewhere, at the edge of known space, something was waiting to test them all. 3 months after the containment field crisis, Sarah stood in Station Helios's newly established Quantum Research Center, surrounded by a team that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. Humans worked alongside Mercidians, Thorians, and even a pair of quantum collective nodes, all focused on the massive holographic display dominating the center of the room. The anomaly's energy signature matches the quantum resonance patterns we observed during the containment field stabilization, Sarah explained, manipulating the three-dimensional model with practiced ease. It's as if something out there is generating the same kind of quantum harmonics, but on a massive scale. Zexley, who had become a permanent liaison to the station, moved their crystalline form through the hologram, antennae tracing the complex patterns. The similarities are unlikely to be coincidental. The question is whether these harmonics are natural or artificial. Neither, said Dr. Velen, a young Mercidian physicist whose membrane rippled with excitement rather than the traditional disdain. Look at these subpatterns. They show characteristics of both ordered and chaotic systems simultaneously. It's as if they're evolving. Sarah finished, sharing a look of understanding with her colleague. This kind of collaborative insight had become more common as species barriers began to break down, though not without resistance. The door slid open, admitting Kira, now officially the station's xenobiology research director. You all need to see this, she said, her usual calm demeanor shaken. We just received a transmission from Deep Space Observatory 227. They've got visual contact with whatever's causing those anomalies. The room fell silent as Kira transferred the data to the main display. The hologram shifted, showing a section of space near the galaxy's outer rim. At first, it seemed empty, just another patch of star-studded void. Then they saw it, or rather, saw where they couldn't see. It's absorbing light. One of the quantum collective nodes chimed, its crystalline structure vibrating with what might have been concern. Not like a black hole. More like it's learning how light works, Sarah whispered. The phenomenon looked like a living shadow, its edges constantly shifting and reforming. As they watched, a star's light passed through its periphery, and the pattern of that light seemed to be absorbed and replicated throughout its structure. "It's exactly what we theorized," Zexley said quietly. "A quantum-level intelligence, operating on principles we barely understand. And it's heading toward populated space." A subtle vibration ran through the station, not from any physical threat this time, but from the activation of emergency protocols. Throughout Station Helios, alert signals began pulsing softly as the information was disseminated to other research teams. "How long?" Sarah asked, already running calculations in her head. "At its current velocity, it will reach the outer colonies in approximately 6 months, Kira reported. "But that's assuming it maintains its current course and speed. Given what we're seeing of its adaptive capabilities, it could arrive much sooner," Zexley finished. "Or much later. We cannot predict the behavior of something we don't understand." Sarah stepped closer to the hologram, studying the way the entity moved. Something about its patterns tickled at her memory. "The quantum harmonics we use to stabilize the containment field," she said slowly. "They're not just similar to this entity's emissions. They're a simplified version of them." Dr. Vellen's membrane shifted to a deep blue of realization. "Are you suggesting that our containment technology accidentally tapped into whatever this entity uses to manipulate quantum states?" "Not accidentally," Zexley corrected, their crystalline form catching the light in new patterns. "Engineer Chen's human intuition led her to discover principles that the rest of us missed. Principles that this entity seems to use naturally. Then we might be able to communicate with it," Kira suggested. "If we can understand how it processes and replicates patterns, or defend against it," came a new voice. Director Nexel floated into the room, his membrane now showing the more muted colors he'd adopted since the crisis. "The Mercidian High Council has reviewed the data. They're calling for immediate military preparation." Sarah felt a chill at the words. "You want to attack something we don't even understand." "We want to be ready," Nexel countered, though without his former arrogance. "This entity, whatever it is, represents an unknown threat to every civilized world. The High Council believes." "The High Council's beliefs nearly led to disaster 3 months ago," Zexley interrupted smoothly. "Perhaps it's time to consider alternatives to our traditional responses." The room's tension was broken by a sudden shift in the holographic display. The entity had changed direction, moving with purpose toward a small star system on the edge of monitored space. "That's research. Outpost Gamma," one of the quantum collective nodes announced. "Population 712, mostly scientists and their families." Sarah was already moving. "How long until it reaches them?" 48 hours at current velocity." The next few moments were a flurry of activity as the team mobilized. This was what they had been preparing for, though none of them had expected the test to come so soon. Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, but this time it was tempered by something else, the confidence of knowing she wasn't facing the challenge alone. "I need volunteers for a first contact team," she announced, looking around the room. "We'll need to modify the station's quantum communication array to broadcast on the harmonics we observed. It's our best chance to establish contact before anyone does something stupid." "The High Council won't approve," Nexel began, but stopped his hands and appendages raised around the room. Humans, Mercidians, and others, all volunteering without hesitation. "With respect, Director," Dr. Vellen said, their membrane showing patterns of determination. "We're past the point where any single species can claim authority here. This entity doesn't recognize our political boundaries or hierarchies. We need to approach it with open minds and combine knowledge." Nexel's membrane shifted through several colors before settling on a shade Sarah had never seen before. "Then I volunteer as well," he said quietly. "Someone needs to keep this from becoming a diplomatic incident." Sarah caught Kira's knowing smile. 3 months ago, such cooperation would have been unthinkable. Now it felt natural, necessary. As the team began preparations, Sarah studied the hologram one last time. The entity's movements seemed almost graceful now that she knew what to look for. Less threatening, more curious. "Ready or not," she murmured, "first contact is coming to us." The quantum harmonics of Station Helios hummed around them, a reminder of how far they'd come and how far they had yet to go. Humanity had earned its place among the stars not through force or fear, but through the very qualities others had dismissed: curiosity, adaptability, and the ability to see patterns in chaos. Now those qualities might be all that stood between civilization and an intelligence that defied understanding. Sarah watched her mixed team of humans and aliens working together, each contributing their unique perspectives to the challenge ahead. The storm was rising, but they would face it together. The modified quantum array of Research Outpost Gamma hummed with energy as Sarah made the final adjustments. Around her, the combined team from Station Helios worked with focused intensity, each member contributing their unique expertise to the unprecedented task ahead. Through the outpost's reinforced windows, she could see the approaching entity, a living void that seemed to drink in the light of nearby stars. Quantum harmonics synchronized, Dr. Velen announced, their membrane showing patterns of both excitement and anxiety. "The entity is responding to our initial pulses. Are you certain this is wise?" Director Nexel asked, though his tone held more curiosity than criticism now. "We're essentially inviting it to communicate. Sometimes the greatest discoveries come from taking calculated risks," Zexley observed, their crystalline form refracting the emergency lights in complex patterns. "Humanity has taught us this, time and again." Sarah watched as the entity's outer edges began to ripple in response to their quantum signals. The patterns were becoming more ordered, more deliberate, like watching someone learn a new language in real time. Next to her, Kira monitored the biological readings with intense focus. "Its structure is shifting," Kira reported. "The quantum field is organizing itself into, I think these might be cognitive patterns. It's trying to think in a way we can understand," Sarah realized. She adjusted the harmonics slightly, matching the entity's emerging patterns. "We need to meet it halfway." The void outside the window pulsed, and suddenly the outpost's quantum computers came alive with streaming data. Not numbers or words, but pure concepts translated through quantum states, ideas that existed between traditional thoughts. "This is remarkable," one of the quantum collective nodes chimed. "It thinks in probability fields. Every concept is simultaneously multiple concepts until observed and interpreted." Sarah felt a familiar excitement building. The same feeling she'd had when solving the containment field crisis. "It's not just communicating," she said. "It's teaching us how it thinks." The next few hours were a blur of discovery and revelation. The entity, they learned, was both ancient and new. A quantum intelligence that existed in a state of constant evolution. It had been drawn to their sector of space by the quantum harmonics of their technology, seeing in them the potential for something it had never found before: true communication with linear beings. "It's been searching," Sarah explained to the assembled team, her hands moving through the holographic representations of the entity's quantum language. "Not to conquer or destroy, but to find others who could understand it. Our use of quantum harmonics in the containment field was like hearing someone speak your language for the first time in centuries." "But why now?" Nexel asked. "Why reveal itself to us?" "Because it detected something coming," Zexley answered, their antennae quivering with new understanding. "Something that exists in the spaces between galaxies. Something that even it cannot comprehend alone." The entity's next transmission confirmed Zexley's words, showing them glimpses of vast, dark spaces between stars, and something moving within those spaces, something that devoured quantum probability itself. The entity had been running, not from fear, but to find allies before the greater threat arrived. "That's why it was absorbing and replicating patterns," Kira said. "It was learning how to translate its knowledge into forms we could understand. It needs our help as much as we need its." Sarah looked around the room at the assembled beings. Humans, Mercidians, Vaker, and others, all working together in ways that would have seemed impossible just months ago. Each brought their own perspective, their own way of understanding the universe, and now they were being asked to comprehend something even greater. We need to call a full conference, she decided. Not just the Mercidian High Council or the Arcturus Consortium, but representatives from every spacefaring species. What's coming affects all of us. The politics alone will be nightmarish, Nexel observed, though his membrane showed colors of determination rather than defeat. Then we'll handle the politics, Kira said firmly. We've learned how to work together. Now we need to teach others to do the same. The entity pulsed again, transmitting new information, not just about the threat, but about possibilities. It showed them ways to expand their understanding of quantum mechanics, to develop defenses against the approaching darkness. But more importantly, it showed them a vision of cooperation that transcended traditional boundaries. It's not just about survival, Sarah realized, watching the patterns form and reform. It's about evolution, growing beyond what we are now, all of us together. A synthesis of different ways of thinking, Zexley agreed. Linear and quantum, organic and energy, all contributing to something greater than the sum of its parts. The next weeks were a whirlwind of activity as the news spread throughout known space. The entity's presence caused initial panic, but as understanding grew, fear began to turn to hope. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, helping to bridge the gap between traditional science and quantum possibilities. Research Outpost Gamma became the heart of a new initiative, drawing scientists and thinkers from across the galaxy. The quantum language they developed with the entity became a new way of sharing ideas, transcending the limitations of traditional communication. 6 months after the entity's arrival, Sarah stood in the outpost's main observation deck, watching ships arrive from dozens of worlds. Each brought new perspectives, new ways of thinking about the challenges ahead. The entity, now a permanent partner in their endeavors, pulsed with patterns that she had learned to recognize as satisfaction. "Did you know it would work out this way?" she asked Zexley, who had remained as an advisor and friend. The Vaker's crystalline form shimmered. "We hoped." The consortium had long believed that humanity's greatest strength was not your technology or your resilience, but your ability to imagine new possibilities. You see patterns others miss, connections others overlook. You dream of things that have never been, and then you make them real. "And now we all dream together," Kira added, joining them at the window. Her new role as xenobiology coordinator had her working with species they hadn't even known existed months ago. The entity pulsed again, sharing a concept that translated roughly to growth through diversity. Sarah smiled, understanding now what she had begun to suspect. The approaching darkness was a challenge, yes, but also an opportunity, a catalyst for unity that might never have been achieved otherwise. The containment field crisis seems so small now, she mused. But without it, none of this would have happened. Small moments shape the future, Zexley observed. One person standing up for what they believe, one mind seeing what others cannot, one voice speaking when others are silent. That is how change begins. Outside the window, the entity's quantum field rippled with new patterns, not of warning or instruction now, but of possibility. The darkness between galaxies was still coming, but they would face it together, each species contributing its unique perspective to a defense that encompassed all ways of thinking. Sarah watched as a ship from Earth joined the growing fleet around the outpost. Humanity had found its place among the stars not by conquering or competing, but by building bridges between different ways of understanding the universe. Their greatest strength had turned out to be not what they knew, but how they thought, and their willingness to share that thinking with others. The quantum harmonics hummed around them, a symphony of unified purpose. The future was uncertain, full of challenges they had yet to face, but they would face them together, growing stronger through their differences, evolving into something new. It was, Sarah thought, watching the stars shine against the living void of their quantum ally, a new dawn for all of them.